The day my husband, Ethan, died, I stood in the hospital hallway, clutching our 6-month-old twins, Olivia and Mason, while the world around me blurred into silence. I thought family would rush to hold us, to share the weight of our grief. Instead, I saw turned backs, cold eyes, and doors quietly closing. My parents said they were too old to help. Ethan's parents whispered that without him, there's no bond anymore. My own sister avoided my gaze, each word cut deeper than death itself. I was left standing there, a widow at 28, with 2 tiny lives depending on me, and no one by my side. Just when despair threatened to swallow me whole, headlights pierced the night outside my crumbling apartment. A black car stopped. And from it stepped my grandfather, Henry Coleman, the billionaire my family despised. He looked at me and said, "Come home, Emma." I remember the silence of the church after Ethan's funeral. People murmured polite condolences, but no one stayed long. Olivia whimpered in her stroller, Mason kicked and fussed, and I stood alone by the coffin, feeling like I was disappearing into thin air. When it ended, I looked for my parents. "Can you come by tonight? I don't know how to manage the babies alone," I asked, my voice trembling. My mother pressed her lips together. "Emma, your father and I are too old. You'll figure it out. You're young." "Too old?" I choked out. "They're your grandchildren." She looked away. My father simply said, "You chose your life. Handle it." Then they walked out, not even glancing at the twins. Later that week, I tried Ethan's parents. His father, Robert, barely opened the door. "Without Ethan, there's nothing tying us to you anymore. We have our own problems." I held Mason tighter. "Your son is gone, and these babies are all that's left of him. Don't you care?" Robert's eyes darted away. "I can't take on more responsibility." The door closed with a final click. By the 3rd day, I stopped calling anyone. My sister, Sarah, left me a voicemail. "Emma, I just can't deal with crying babies right now. Call me when things calm down." Calm down? My husband was in the ground. My children needed milk and diapers. I hadn't slept in 3 nights. My apartment smelled of sour formula and damp clothes. That evening, both twins cried at once, high, piercing wails that shredded my chest. I collapsed on the floor, cradling them, sobbing into their tiny heads. "It's just us now," I whispered. "Just us 3. The phone rang. For a moment, hope sparked. Maybe someone finally cared. It was Sarah again. "Emma, you need to toughen up. You can't expect people to drop everything for you," I snapped. "I buried my husband 2 days ago. Don't talk to me about tough. I begged you, begged Mom, begged Dad. Everyone turned away. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" There was silence, then a sigh. "I'm sorry, but I can't help." The line went dead. The room felt colder. The twins cried harder. I pressed my back against the wall, shaking. That was the moment I understood. I was truly abandoned. Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky. I stared out the cracked window, watching rain streak down the glass. In that darkness, I whispered to Ethan, "I don't know if I can do this without you." I didn't know then that the answer was already on its way, in the form of the one man no one expected to step forward. The storm outside grew louder, the twins' cries echoing through the tiny apartment. I was pacing the floor with Mason in my arms when a knock rattled the door. My heart jumped. Nobody ever visited anymore. I hesitated. Another knock, firmer this time. I pulled the door open and froze. There he was. Tall despite his age, silver hair slicked back, eyes sharp as steel yet warm with something I hadn't seen in weeks' care. My grandfather, Henry Coleman, stood in the rain with an umbrella in one hand and a briefcase in the other. "Grandpa?" My voice cracked. He stepped inside, shutting the storm behind him. His gaze swept across the clutter, the empty bottles, the twins screaming in their crib. He set the umbrella down and walked straight to me. "Emma," he said firmly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You and these babies are coming with me. Tonight." I shook my head in disbelief. "Why? After all these years? They all hate you. Mom, Dad, they said you were ruthless, cold. Why are you here?" He crouched beside Olivia's crib, gently stroking her tiny hand. His voice softened. Because I buried my wife when your father was just a newborn. I know the darkness you're drowning in, and because you're family, that's enough for me. Tears blurred my vision. I can't leave. This is my home, even if it's falling apart. Grandpa Henry's eyes locked on mine. This is not a home. It's a prison of grief. I won't let my granddaughter and great-grandchildren rot here. Pack what you need. And, Grandpa, I don't want to be a burden. He chuckled, but it was tinged with sadness. Emma, I own 5 houses and half a dozen companies. You think 2 babies and a heartbroken widow are a burden? No. You're my blood. That makes you my responsibility. And my joy. For the first time in days, something inside me cracked, not from despair, but from hope. I whispered, "What if they hate me for accepting your help?" He straightened, his presence filling the tiny apartment. Let them hate. When the world turns its back, you don't beg at closed doors, you walk through the ones still open. And my door, Emma, will never close on you. I covered my mouth, sobbing. I don't even know what to bring. Bring the children, he said simply. The rest doesn't matter. Within an hour, the twins and I were in his sleek black car. As the city lights blurred past, Mason finally slept on my chest, and Olivia's tiny hand gripped my finger. I leaned back against the leather seat, my chest rising for the first time without crushing weight. Grandpa Henry glanced at me in the rearview mirror. From tonight on, you're not alone. Do you understand? I nodded, clutching my children tighter. I understand. And I'll never forget this. The storm faded as we pulled up to towering iron gates. Beyond them stood a mansion glowing with golden light, its doors wide open waiting for us. When the iron gates closed behind us that night, I felt as though I had stepped into another world. The mansion loomed above, its windows glowing warmly against the fading storm. Inside, a butler named Michael and a housekeeper named Grace were waiting. They took my coat, offered a cup of tea, and almost miraculously had a nursery already prepared. 2 cribs stood side by side, soft blankets folded neatly, shelves stacked with formula and diapers. I stared, stunned. How? How is this possible? Grandpa Henry gave a small smile. I made a few calls. When I said you were coming home, I meant tonight. I sat on the rocking chair, watching Olivia and Mason fall asleep more peacefully than they had in weeks. For the first time since Ethan's death, I let my body relax. The next morning, sunlight streamed through tall windows. I wandered into the dining hall, half afraid it had all been a dream, but there was Henry at the head of the table, reading the paper, a plate of eggs and toast waiting for me. Sit, Emma, he said without looking up. Eat. You'll need strength. I slid into the chair, feeling strangely like a child again. I don't know how to thank you. Don't, he replied flatly. Then he folded the paper, his eyes sharp. Instead, promise me you'll learn. I blinked. Learn what? How to stand on your own 2 feet. Not just survive, Emma. Survive is what you've been doing in that crumbling apartment. Here, you're going to grow. For your children, and for yourself. My fork clattered against the plate. Grandpa, I don't have a degree in business. I don't even know where to start. You'll start at the beginning. With me. He leaned back, folding his arms. You're a Coleman. Whether the rest of them like it or not. I built my empire with nothing but grit and numbers scrawled on napkins. You'll sit in on meetings. You'll read reports. You'll ask questions until you understand. And when you fail because you will fail, you'll get back up. His words felt heavy, but behind them I sensed something deeper. Belief. That week, Henry took me into the heart of his company. I sat quietly in conference rooms, clutching Olivia's diaper bag, while executives in sharp suits threw around terms I barely understood. When I looked overwhelmed, Henry would tap his pen against the table, a subtle signal. Pay attention, you belong here. At night, when the babies were asleep, he'd sit across from me in the study. Balance sheet, he'd say, sliding papers over. Tell me what you see. I see numbers that don't make sense, I admitted. Then keep looking until they do. It was exhausting, juggling motherhood and lessons in business, but little by little, I began to grasp patterns. Revenue, expenses, strategy. Words that once intimidated me now felt like tools I could learn to wield. Sometimes, I broke down. One evening I whispered, Grandpa, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I should just stay small. He leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. Emma, you buried your husband, carried twins on your own, and faced a world that turned its back on you. Don't you dare tell me you're small. I swallowed hard, tears burning in my eyes. Olivia's laugh from the nursery carried into the room, followed by Mason's babbling. I looked toward the sound, and for the first time, I didn't just hear need, I heard possibility. That was when I realized Henry wasn't just giving me a roof. He was giving me the chance to rebuild, not with pity, but with purpose. By the time Olivia and Mason turned one, I could read a profit and loss statement without panicking. I still felt like an imposter in the boardroom, but Grandpa never let me shrink into the background. Emma, speak, he'd order whenever I hesitated. But what if I'm wrong? I whispered once. Then you'll be wrong loudly, and you'll learn twice as fast. That was his way, no softness in lessons, only in the way he tucked the twins into bed every night. It was during one of those late nights, while I watched Olivia gnaw on a teething ring, that an idea struck me. I had been struggling to find safe, affordable baby products when Ethan was sick. What if other mothers had the same problem? What if I could make something better? I sketched a rough plan on a notepad. Organic baby lotion, diapers free from harsh chemicals, bottles designed for colicky infants. I called it Little Haven. When I nervously told Grandpa, I braced for criticism. Instead, his eyes lit up. Now that, he said, tapping the table, isn't just surviving, that's building. Do it. A week later, I walked into my first meeting with a supplier. My hands trembled under the conference table. The man across from me, Mr. Kent, leaned back with a smirk. You're very young, Mrs. Coleman, he said. And frankly, you don't look like someone who knows how to run a business. Why should I trust you with my inventory? My cheeks burned. Part of me wanted to shrink. But then I heard Grandpa's voice in my head. Speak. Even if you're wrong, speak. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Because I've already survived the worst, I said steadily. I buried my husband. I raised twins when everyone abandoned me. I'm still here. If I can do that, I can run a company. And if you don't work with me, someone else will, and they'll get the profit you passed up. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Kent's smirk faltered. You've got some fire. I'll give you that. Fine. I'll take a small order. It was enough to start. The first weeks were chaos, packaging delays, late-night emails, Mason spilling juice all over my laptop. But slowly, orders trickled in. Mothers wrote reviews. Finally, products I can trust. Photos of babies wrapped in my diapers filled the website. Each order felt like proof that I was no longer just a widow scrambling to survive, I was a businesswoman. One evening, I rushed into Grandpa's study, waving my phone. Grandpa, we hit our first 1,000 orders! He set down his book and gave the smallest, proudest smile. Congratulations, Emma. Now, do it 10,000 times more. I laughed through tears. You never let me enjoy the moment, do you? He chuckled. Enjoy it, then get back to work. Growth waits for no one. As I walked back to the nursery, Olivia reached out her tiny hand. Mason babbled something that sounded like, Mama, and I realized, this wasn't just business. It was the first spark of a life I was creating not just for me, but for them. And sparks, when fed, can grow into a fire no one can put out. Little Haven kept growing faster than I ever imagined. By the time Olivia and Mason turned 3, our products were on shelves across Kentucky. Reporters wanted interviews, magazines wanted photo shoots, and suddenly people who once looked through me were speaking my name with awe. And that's when the phone calls started. The first was from my mother. Emma, sweetheart. Her voice sang through the receiver, syrupy sweet in a way I hadn't heard since childhood. I read about you in the paper. You've done so well. I miss you and I miss my grandbabies. Why don't you bring them by? It's been too long. I almost dropped the phone. This was the same woman who told me to handle it when Ethan died. The same woman who couldn't even look at Olivia and Mason without flinching. I swallowed hard. Mom, when I begged you for help, you turned me away. She chuckled nervously. Oh, Emma, that was a difficult time for everyone. We were grieving too. Surely you understand. I stared at the twins playing on the carpet, Mason trying to balance blocks while Olivia clapped for him. They had deserved her love then, not now. "I'll think about it," I said coldly, and hung up. A week later, a letter arrived, stiff white envelope, embossed with gold. It was from Robert, my father-in-law. "Emma," it read. "We may have had misunderstandings in the past, but blood is blood, your family. Perhaps we should discuss combining efforts, your company with our family's resources. Together, we'd be unstoppable." I crumpled the letter in my hands, fury boiling. Misunderstandings? He had closed the door in my face while I held Mason in my arms. Now he wanted to merge because I was profitable. That evening, I vented in the study. Grandpa Henry listened quietly, swirling his glass of whiskey. "They all want something now," I spat. "Where were they when I was starving? When Olivia screamed from hunger? When Mason was sick with fever? Now they remember I exist?" Henry leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "And do you know why they've come crawling back? Because they're hypocrites?" I muttered. "Because success changes the way parasites see you," he said, voice like steel. "When you were weak, you were useless. Now that you're strong, you're a resource. Don't confuse their greed for love." His words sliced through me, both painful and clarifying. That weekend, Sarah showed up at the mansion gates. The guard called me. "Your sister is here, says it's urgent." Against my better judgment, I went down. Sarah stood there in a designer coat, clutching a box wrapped in ribbon. "Emma!" she squealed, throwing her arms wide. "Look at you, living in this palace. I'm so proud of you." I raised an eyebrow. "Proud? You ignored my calls for months." She shifted uncomfortably. "We all make mistakes. I brought a gift for the kids. Can I come in?" Before I could answer, Grandpa appeared at my side. His towering presence made Sarah flinch. He didn't raise his voice, but his words thundered. "Family doesn't abandon its own. Then knock when fortune comes. Go home." Sarah's face paled. "You can't keep Emma from us forever," she hissed. I stepped forward, my hands trembling but my voice firm. "No, Sarah. He's not keeping me from you. You lost me the moment you turned your back." She blinked, stunned, before spinning on her heel and storming off. I exhaled shakily, leaning against the iron gate. Grandpa placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "You're learning," he said quietly. "Love is proven in the dark, not the light." As the gates shut again, I realized the whispers of jealousy were only getting louder. And soon, they would crash into a storm I could no longer ignore. It was a Saturday evening when the storm finally broke. Olivia and Mason were painting in the sunroom, their little hands smeared with colors, while I prepared dinner with Grace. Suddenly, Michael the butler rushed in, his normally calm face pale. "Miss Emma," he said quickly, "there's a crowd at the gate. Your parents, your sister, and Robert, your father-in-law. They demand to see you." My chest tightened. "Now?" "Yes. They've brought papers. Legal documents, it seems." Grandpa Henry appeared in the doorway, his cane tapping against the marble floor. He didn't look surprised. "It was only a matter of time," he muttered. "Let them in. But, Emma, this is your fight, not mine." Minutes later, the front doors opened, and the people who had abandoned me flooded into the grand foyer. My mother's perfume hit me first, sharp and artificial. My father's suit gleamed as though polished for this performance. Sarah clutched her handbag like it contained her dignity. And Robert, my father-in-law, carried a leather folder stuffed with papers. My mother's voice rang out, too cheerful. "Emma, look at this house. You've done so well for yourself." I folded my arms. "What do you want?" Robert stepped forward, slamming the folder onto the table. "Rights. As Ethan's father, I have claims over his share of this empire. And you, Emma, as his widow, have a duty to share with his bloodline." I laughed bitterly. "Claims? Duty? When I begged you for formula for Mason, you shut the door in my face. That was your duty, Robert, and you failed." I won. His jaw clenched. "That was the past. Business is business." "Business?" My voice cracked. "These are children, not assets. My life is not a transaction." My father, Curtis, raised a hand. "Emma, calm yourself. We're family. Let's not make this ugly." If you bring us in, we can all benefit. Think of your children's future. Olivia peeked from behind the banister, wide-eyed. Mason clung to my leg. My blood boiled. My children's future? You mean your pockets? Don't you dare pretend this is about them. Sarah suddenly burst out, her voice shrill. You're selfish, Emma. We all struggled too. And now that you've made it, you shut us out? We're entitled to a share? I spun on her, my voice trembling with fury. Entitled? When Ethan's body was still warm, I begged you to sit with me. You said you couldn't handle crying babies. Now you want a cut of the success you never lifted a finger to build? She faltered, but my father stepped in, his voice low and threatening. Emma, this arrogance won't end well. You wouldn't even have survived without your grandfather. None of this is truly yours. The words stabbed deep. For a split second, doubt flickered. Was I just living under Henry's shadow? But then I felt Olivia's tiny hand gripping mine, Mason pressing against my side. I saw Henry standing silently in the corner, his eyes steady, urging me to stand. I straightened. My voice shook, but grew louder with every word. You're right. Without Grandpa, I wouldn't have survived. He opened his doors when you slammed yours. He gave me a chance when you gave me nothing. But everything I've built since the sleepless nights, the endless work, the tears I hid from my children, that's mine. Not yours. And you will never touch it. Robert slammed his fist on the table. You think you can shut us out? We'll take this to court. Do it, I snapped. I have every receipt, every review, every contract showing I built Little Haven myself. Go ahead. But you'll lose and you'll show the world what cowards you are, trying to steal from a widow and her children. Sarah's face twisted with rage. You, ungrateful brat, she spat. We're blood. Blood? I laughed, tears streaming down my face. Blood abandoned me when I needed it most. Family isn't who shares your veins, it's who stays when the world collapses. You are not my family. The room fell silent. Robert gathered the papers with shaking hands, his face red with fury. You'll regret this, Curtis muttered under his breath. You'll come crawling back. Sarah's eyes glistened with bitter tears. You'll see what it feels like to be alone. I raised my chin, though my whole body trembled. I already know what it feels like to be alone, and I survived. You can't hurt me anymore. Grandpa Henry finally stepped forward, his cane striking the marble like a gavel. His voice was calm, but final. You heard her. Leave my house, and don't ever come back. The heavy doors swung open. One by one, they filed out, faces pale, masks shattered. When the last echo of their footsteps faded, I collapsed onto the stairs, shaking uncontrollably. Olivia climbed into my lap, whispering, Mommy, are they gone? Yes, sweetheart, I whispered back, clutching her tight. They're gone, and they're never coming back. Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder. You fought well tonight, Emma. I wiped my tears, still trembling. I was terrified. He gave a rare, proud smile. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to stand anyway. And tonight, you stood taller than I ever have. As the mansion doors shut against the storm, I realized something. They hadn't just tried to take my company, they'd tried to take my dignity. And I had finally slammed the door, not just on them, but on the part of me that once begged for their love. After that night, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt like the abandoned widow who once begged for scraps of love. I was Emma Coleman, mother, entrepreneur, survivor, and soon, the world began to see me that way too. Little Haven expanded beyond Kentucky. Orders poured in from across the country. Retailers lined up, investors called, but I remembered Grandpa's advice. Never sell your soul for quick profit. Build slow, build strong. One morning, the Lexington Herald ran a front-page headline, Widow Builds Baby Empire, a story of grit and grace. They photographed me with Olivia and Mason, who sat proudly in my lap holding a bottle of our lotion. When I showed the paper to Grandpa, he chuckled. Grace, grit, empire. Sounds like you, Emma. I laughed, shaking my head. I never wanted to be in the spotlight. You didn't want it, he said. But you earned it. Weeks later, we were invited to a conference in New York, where entrepreneurs shared their stories. I stood on stage, lights blinding me. Olivia and Mason waving from the front row beside Grandpa. My voice trembled at first, but grew steadier as I spoke. When my husband died, I thought my life ended too. Everyone I trusted turned away. But one man opened his door, my grandfather. And with his belief, I built something from nothing. Not just a business, but a life for my children. The audience rose in applause. I spotted tears in Grandpa's eyes, something I had never seen before. After the conference, in the quiet of the hotel suite, I turned to him. Grandpa, I want to create something bigger. A foundation. For Ethan. His brows rose. For Ethan? Yes. For every child who loses a parent too soon. For every widow left with nothing. I want Ethan's name to live on, not just in us, but in the hope we give others. For a long moment, Henry said nothing. Then he set his cane aside and gripped my hands. His voice was low but steady. That is the best business plan you've ever had. We launched the Ethan Coleman Foundation 6 months later. Its mission was simple: provide financial aid, housing, and counseling for single parents. On opening night, I stood with Olivia and Mason on stage, cutting the ribbon. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but my eyes were only on the twins, who beamed with pride. Afterward, Mason tugged at my dress. Mommy, is Daddy proud of us? My throat tightened. I knelt down, cupping his face. Yes, sweetheart. Daddy is smiling from heaven right now. Olivia slipped her hand into mine. And Grandpa too? I looked over at Henry, standing tall though age weighed on him, pride shining in his eyes. Especially Grandpa. Later that evening, he pulled me aside. Emma, he said, voice thick with emotion. I built fortunes, companies, empires. But tonight, you built something greater legacy. And now, I know the family name is safe in your hands. Tears filled my eyes. Grandpa, I couldn't have done any of this without you. He shook his head gently. No, Emma, you could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to. And for the first time, I believed him. Years later, the mansion no longer felt overwhelming. It felt like home. Olivia and Mason were 12 now, bright and spirited, carrying the same determination that once kept me breathing through sleepless nights. One golden autumn afternoon, I told them, we're going to see your father today. They grew quiet, nodding solemnly. We loaded into the car with a bouquet of Ethan's favorite white lilies. Grandpa Henry, older and slower now, insisted on coming too. The cemetery lay beneath a canopy of oaks. The air was crisp, the ground scattered with fallen leaves. I knelt in front of Ethan's grave, tracing the letters carved into the stone. Ethan Coleman, beloved husband and father. Mason placed the flowers gently. Hi, Dad, he whispered. Olivia crouched beside him, her voice trembling. We're doing okay. Mom made sure of it. My heart clenched. I swallowed hard and said, Ethan, I wish you could see them now. They're strong, brave, everything we dreamed they'd be. Behind me, Grandpa's cane tapped the earth. And she's stronger than even you believed she could be, he added softly. I looked up at him. His silver hair gleamed in the sun, his face lined with age, but his eyes were steady as ever. Grandpa, I said, tears welling. I don't know how to thank you. For saving us. For saving me. He shook his head. You already have. By becoming the woman you are. By raising those children into lions, not lambs. Olivia slipped her hand into mine. Mom, she asked, her eyes wide. What's family, really? Is it just people who share our blood? I took a deep breath, the wind rustling the leaves around us. No, sweetheart. Family is who stays when the world turns its back. Family is who fights for you, believes in you, and never lets go. Blood doesn't make family, love does. Mason leaned against me, nodding slowly as if memorizing the words. So, Daddy's still family, even if he's not here? I kissed his forehead. Always. He's here in us, in everything we do. We stood together in silence. The children held my hands, and Grandpa stood behind us like a sentinel, guarding the family he had rescued from the ashes. As the sun dipped low, casting long golden shadows across the cemetery, I felt an overwhelming peace. I remembered the night I had whispered in despair, I don't know if I can do this without you, Ethan. Now, Standing here with my children and my grandfather beside me, I finally had my answer. I could. I did. And I would keep doing it for them, for Grandpa, for Ethan's memory. As we walked back to the car, Mason tugged my sleeve. Mommy, will we always be okay? I smiled through tears, squeezing both twins' hands. Yes, darling, because we have each other. And that's more than enough. Grandpa paused at the gates, looking back at Ethan's grave, then at us. His voice, steady and proud, carried across the quiet air. The Coleman family stands, not because of wealth, but because of love. Never forget that. And in that moment, under the autumn sky, I knew the circle was complete.